Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sanhedrin. We are up to Perek Zayin, Mishnah Daled. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Lavdi ben Chaim lechaim, v'derefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shach Chulei Israel, and the Achlama Mera Binyamin Or Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. This Mishnah lists 18 sins that are punished with execution by stoning. The sins punishable by burning and beheading are listed in chapter 9, Mishnah 1, and those punishable by strangling are listed in chapter 11, Mishnah 1. The sins are merely named here. They are explained in the rest of the chapter and the next chapter. Elu hen haniskalin, these are the ones who are sentenced to stoning. Haba'al ha'em v'al eshet ha'av v'al ha'kala v'al ha'zechur v'al ha'behema. Someone who cohabits with his mother or with his father's wife who is not his mother, or with his daughter-in-law. In all these cases, the woman is also sentenced to death by stoning, or with another man, or with an animal. Va'isha mivi'ah et ha'behema, a woman who brings an animal on herself. V'amgadef, one who blesses, meaning curses God. The term bless is used in place of curse because it is inappropriate even to speak of cursing with respect to the divine name. Va'oved avodah zarah, one who worships an idol. Va'noten mizar'o lamolech, one who gives one of his children to Molech. This was a practice of the Canaanites. Ubal ovi yideoni, one who practices over yideoni, certain methods of communicating with the dead. V'amchalel et Shabbat, one who violates Shabbat, meaning he does one of the 39 forbidden types of labor. V'amkalel aviv v'imo, one who curses his father or mother. V'abal nara morasa, one who cohabits with the betrothed nara. In most cases, adultery is punished by strangling. Adultery with the betrothed nara, however, is punished by stoning, which is a harsher form of execution than strangling. V'amesit, one who persuades another person to worship an idol. V'amadiach, one who corrupts the residents of a town by persuading them to worship an idol. V'amchashef, one who performs magic. Uben tzurar u'moreh, and the wayward and rebellious son. The wayward and rebellious son is the subject of chapter 8. The Mishnah discusses the first sin listed above, namely cohabiting with one's mother. It states the punishment for someone who does this sin by mistake. For example, he did not realize who the woman was. Haba'al ha'em, if someone cohabits with his mother who was once married to his father but is now unmarried by mistake. Chayav aliyah mishum em u'mishum eshet av. He must bring one sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with his mother and one sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with his father's wife. Since she is his mother and was the wife of his father, he has committed two sins and must bring two offerings. The requirement to bring two offerings applies only where his mother was once married to his father but is now unmarried. If she was never married to his father, meaning it was born out of wedlock, he has committed the sin of cohabiting with his mother, but not the sin of cohabiting with his father's wife. Therefore, he brings only one offering. If she is still married to his father, he would have to bring a third offering for the sin of cohabiting with a married woman. Rabbi Yehuda but Rabbi Yehuda says, Eno chayav ela mishum ha'em bilvad, he must bring a sin offering only for the sin of cohabiting with his mother. Rabbi Yehuda learns from a verse that one who cohabits with his mother brings an offering only for that sin, even if he commits other sins with the same act. And the Rav tells us that Achav follows the opinion of the Tana Kama, that he would have to bring two sin offerings. The next sin listed above, namely cohabiting with the wife of one's father, is the next subject of the Mishnah. Haba'al eshet ha'av, if someone cohabits with the wife of his father who is still married to his father but is not his mother by mistake, chayav aliyah mishum eshet av mishum eshet ish, he must bring one sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with his father's wife and a second sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with the married woman. Although it is not stated in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this ruling as well. He learns from another verse that the sinner must bring a sin offering only for the sin of cohabiting with his father's wife and not for the sin of cohabiting with a married woman. Ben b'chaya aviv, ben la'achar mitat aviv, cohabiting with one's father's wife is forbidden both during his father's lifetime and after his father's death. Usually a married woman is forbidden to other men only as long as the marriage lasts. After the husband's death or their divorce, anyone may marry her. However, the wife of a man's father remains forbidden to him even after her husband, his father, dies or divorces her, As the Mishnah states below, the same is true regarding a man's daughter-in-law. She remains forbidden to her father-in-law even after her husband, which is his son, dies or divorces her. Ben min ha'erusin, ben min nisuin, both during their erusin and during their nisuin. 2 acts are needed for a marriage to fully take effect. The first act, which is called erusin or kiddushin, makes the bride and groom married in most ways. For example, intimacy between the bride and another man is adultery and is punished with execution, but they are forbidden to live together until they perform the second act, which is called nisuin or chuppah. In olden times, the 2 acts were performed a long time apart, often a year or more. Nowadays, they're usually performed one after the other in a single ceremony. The words erusin and nisuin refer not only to the acts themselves, but to the periods of marriage that each one establishes. Therefore, the period between the 2 acts is also called erusin, and the period after the second act is also called nisuin. The Mishnah teaches that since the wife of a man's father is considered married to his father even during erusin, cohabitation with her at that time is punishable with stoning. The third sin, namely cohabiting with one's daughter-in-law, haban kalato, if someone cohabits with his daughter-in-law who is still married to his son by mistake, chayav aleh mishum kalato, mishum eshet ish, he must bring 1 sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with his daughter-in-law and a 2nd sin offering for the sin of cohabiting with the married woman. Ben b'chay beno, ben lachamitat beno, cohabiting with one's daughter-in-law is forbidden both during his son's lifetime and after his death. Ben min ha'erusin, ben min ha'nisuin, both during their erusin and during their nisuin. The Mishnah names the next 3 sins that were listed above. Habal ha'zichu v'al ha'behema, a man who cohabits with another man or with an animal. Va'isha mevi'at ha'behema, and a woman who brings an animal on herself. The Torah in Vayikra, chapter 20, verse 15 and 16 states that the animal involved in either of the last 2 acts must also be put to death by stoning. The Mishnah explains why this is so. Im adam chatat behema mechatat. If the person sinned, in what way did the animal sin? Rather, because ruin came to a person through this animal, the Torah therefore states that it should be stoned so that others will not sin with it as well. Another explanation, it must be executed so that it does not happen that the animal walks in the street and people say this is the animal that caused so-and-so to be stoned, which will bring shame to the sinner. The Torah is concerned with the dignity of the sinner even after his death, and therefore requires that the animal be executed to prevent it from reminding people of his sin. And that is in the Mishnah Daled. Mishnah 8 teaches about the next sin listed in Mishnah 4. Hamgadev, someone who blesses, meaning curses God. Eno chayav ad sheyifaresh et Hashem. He is not liable to execution unless he says the name of God. If he merely heard someone else say the name of God and then he made the curse, he is not executed because he did not say the name himself. He is not put to death unless he used the names of God to say name should strike name, or name should curse name, as the Gemara says with Rashi. Now the divine name that he cursed should strike name must be the special 4-letter name that begins with either Yud, K, or Aleph, Daled. However, the name he called upon to carry out the cursed name should strike can be any of the 7 names that may not be erased, which are listed in the Rambam, Hilchot Yisodei Torah, chapter 6, Halakha 2. The court cannot punish the person unless witnesses tell the court exactly what he said. However, we do not want the witnesses to repeat a curse of God. The Mishnah explains how this problem is solved. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha said, B'chol yom danin et ha'edim b'chinui. Every day of the trial, the judges deal with the witnesses using a substitute for God's name. Yakei Yossi et Yossi. They would ask, did he say Yoshi should strike Yossi, using Yossi in place of God's name? They use the name Yossi because it has 4 letters like the 4-letter name of God, and because its numerical value, 86, is the same as Elohim, one of God's names. The Gemara Din, however, when the discussion is over and the court is ready to rule that he is guilty, lo ogim b'kinui, they cannot kill him based on a substitute for God's name because they must hear the witnesses repeat exactly what he said. Ela motziim kol adam l'chutz, rather they send everyone out of the room so that the witnesses do not utter the curse in front of more people than necessary. V'sholim et hagadol shebahen, and they question the senior witness. V'omrim lo emo mashu shamata b'ferush, and say to him, say explicitly what you heard him say. V'omer, and he says it. The witness repeats the curse word for word. Since he intends only to help the court fulfill its obligation to try this person, he is allowed to say it. V'adayanim omdin al largehem, the judges, upon hearing the curse, get to their feet, v'korin v'lo ma'achin, and tear their clothes, and they may never sew them back again. the garment may not be sewn up so well that it appears to never have been torn, but sewing it up in an inferior way is allowed. In fact, anyone who hears a curse of God must tear his clothing. The Mishnah mentions only the judges and not the witnesses, because the witnesses already tore their clothes when they heard the curse the first time. As the Tosfot Yom Tov quotes from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 60a. Vashani omer afani kamo. The second witness then says, I too heard the same as he did. There is no need for him to say the curse itself. Vashlishi omer afani kamo. And the third witness, if there is one, says, I too heard the same thing as he did. If there are more witnesses, they say this as well. Although the person can be put to death based on the testimony of only two witnesses, all the witnesses must testify. The Tana of our Mishnah holds that if one witness is disqualified, the defendant cannot be punished even if two valid witnesses remain. All the witnesses must therefore testify, so that if one witness or his testimony is disqualified, the defendant will be spared from the death penalty. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.